Picture this. You wake up, but not in your bed. The air is thick. The concrete walls sweat in the heat. 9 men are squeezed into a space meant for 4, and you realize this is your life. Not for a night. Not for a week. But for years. That was Miguel Hernández. Just a hard-working mechanic from Guadalajara who loved fixing motorcycles, loved tinkering with radios. He wasn't dangerous. He wasn't notorious. He was just ordinary. But when you live in a world where desperation shadows opportunity, one bad decision can flip your entire future. For Miguel, it was saying yes to holding a package for his cousin. When the police stormed his mechanic shop and found that package, his freedom instantly belonged to someone else. 5 years. A Mexican state prison. And the iron gates clanged shut on the life he thought he was building. Now, imagine walking into that prison the first time. Concrete everywhere. Razor wire like teeth above the walls. Guards barking orders. Crowds of men sizing you up the way wolves glance at sheep. In here, survival doesn't come from food on your plate. It comes from knowing invisible maps. Which courtyard you can't cross. Which faces you never stare at. Which guards might shove you for a word too loud. The first nights nearly broke him. He couldn't sleep, sweat dripping from overcrowded bodies, pressed in the same cell, 9 men breathing close. The shouts from the yard, the boots against the floors, the rattling bars. Every sound reminded him, there's no escape. But even inside cages, humans find rhythm. The days fell into routine. Wake up at dawn when the guard slammed your door. Breakfast beans so watered down, they looked like gray soup. Tortillas like thin stones. Nothing tasted like food. It tasted like punishment. Out in the courtyard, prisoners made weights out of paint cans tied to sticks. A football patched more than 20 times bounced across cracked asphalt as men played and shouted, Miguel. Sometimes he just sat, watching, chasing memories of neighborhood games before prison swallowed his world. Nights were the hardest when men whispered stories of lovers waiting, children growing, birthdays they missed. For Miguel, silence brought only regret. But here's the twist. He discovered an unlikely lifeline. A smuggled notebook. Just lines of paper, but it was enough. He wrote down everything: his mother's kitchen, the sound of rain back home, even the simple pleasure of grease under his fingernails from fixing bikes. That notebook turned into his anchor. Soon, other men noticed. They asked him to write letters for them, apologies, love notes, promises. Miguel the quiet mechanic became the prison messenger, the translator of emotions trapped behind bars. Of course, prison is never just about survival. It's about proving you belong in the pack. One cellmate, Ernesto, scar over his eyebrow, eyes sharp like knives, taught Miguel a truth. You don't fight to win. You fight to show you're not food. And when Miguel had to stand his ground over stolen bread, that lesson saved him. A steady stare was enough. Over time, the prison itself became a twisted mirror. Miguel saw different kinds of men. Cold, violent ones who seemed to belong nowhere else. And desperate men like him, dragged in by circumstance, swallowed up by poverty. Every story etched into those walls asked the same question. Does prison punish, or does it just train men to return? Miguel swore he wouldn't be one of the revolving doors. By his 4th year, something had changed. His body was tougher, but his mind... That notebook now brimmed with prison stories, letters, reflections. Words had become Miguel's rebellion. A way to live without being consumed. Ernesto even teased him one evening, as the sunset painted the walls orange. You'll leave here with more words than scars. That's unusual, Miguel laughed. But deep, he clung to that line like a candle in the darkness. And then came the day. The doors opened. The sun outside hit his face so hard it felt unreal. The sky was no longer framed by wire. The air didn't taste the sweat and iron heat. Tasted like life. They handed him a small paper bag, a Bible, a photograph of his family, and that battered notebook. Nothing much, yet they were treasures heavier than gold. As he walked away from prison, Miguel whispered to himself the phrase born from his years inside Mis Palabras, que cicatrices, more words than scars. Because maybe that's what freedom really meant for him. Not that life was easy now. Not that society would welcome him without suspicion, but that he carried more stories than wounds, more hope than hatred. And that is how Miguel Hernández survived 5 years in a Mexican prison. Not as a number, not as a victim, but as a man who walked out with dignity inked across paper and a vow never to walk back inside. And just like Miguel, sometimes our survival depends on the smallest tools: a notebook, a story, a reminder that even behind walls, we are more than what cages us.